Hey guys, welcome to the Practical Christianity podcast. If you are watching this, can you guess what side of my room that the sun is coming in through? I was just looking at the reflection, and this whole side is lit up. So we'll just have to work with that. Today is Monday the 5th, and we're going to be talking about Epiphany and the Magi. Now, I know Epiphany proper is on the 6th. However, some church traditions kind of have that season beginning with whatever that Sunday is. And so yesterday was the 4th, and it was sort of Epiphany Sunday. And so that's why I'm launching in a day or two early on this. So I'm going to read Matthew 2, the first 12 verses 1 and 2. I'm sorry, Matthew 2, 1 and 2. And then just brief little devotion about it, but I wanted to share some things that might be hopefully edifying and encouraging to you. So the scripture says this: Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. So as I mentioned, we're in the season of Epiphany, and this is where the revelation of Christ is sort of celebrated because it's Christ for the nations. The Magi represent that because they weren't Jews. So they were what could be thought of as representing the nations, those who are outside the house of Israel, so to speak. And so Christmas reminded us, not just Christmas Day, of course, but the Christmas season reminded us that God entered creation in order to redeem it. And so what Epiphany does is it shows us that this redemption isn't just for Israel. It's certainly for Israel, but it's not just for Israel. It's for the whole world. And of course, that gets developed in the book of Acts. But we see here that the light has dawned in Bethlehem when Christ was born. And that light, the light of Christ, the light of the world, breaks into darkness wherever it is, not just in Israel, not just for the religious, but for everyone, because the darkness is everywhere, because sin has impacted everyone everywhere. So it's needed everywhere. And what's interesting is that these magi, I know that, I know astrology and astronomy are not the same thing, but these magi were sort of astrologers. I mean, they would look for signs and things in the sky. So it wasn't just a matter of, following different patterns of planets and stars. It was that, but it was sort of a combination because they were looking for particular signs to lead them. And as I mentioned, they were not Jews, and they did not have the scriptures. They did not worship in the temple, but they did see a sign. Now, this is one of those interesting places in the scripture you can look at all throughout the Old Testament and the New, things that are not the ordinary way of learning things from God, not the standard means of grace, so to speak. I am not recommending to go out and stargaze tonight and determine what your future is. I'm not, that's not what I'm suggesting, but that's what they did. And they responded to what they saw. They came seeking. And so what we learn is that they traveled hundreds of miles through desert and no doubt through danger. And they were following this star, and they were asking this question that we read in the scripture: where is he who has been born King of the Jews? Now, think about that. These men, however many magi there were, they had wealth, they had education, they had status, and they could have easily just stayed at home. They didn't have to make this trip. This was not required of them. They could have just said, hey, that's pretty interesting, and just been very curious about it, had great conversations about it, but they didn't need to do anything about it. They couldn't immediately understand how it impacted them. And I think what's really interesting is, and I love this phrase, I use this, I don't know I'm sure I plagiarized it from 100 different people. It's really a great phrase. but the Magi were going to seek truth wherever it led. And I think that's really important that we be that kind of, we be those sorts of people as well, to be the kind of people uh, who follow or seek the truth wherever it leads us. Because if we believe that all truth is God's truth, then we don't have to be scared of the truth. We need, in fact, because we know that God is truth, that Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, that if it is the truth, then it corresponds with reality, and God is the God of reality. So we're on safe grounding when we follow the truth. I didn't mean to go there; it just sort of happened. Anyway, but they did this, and this is what I'm really trying to get to here: is it cost them everything to do that, or at least it was very costly, and it could have cost them their lives. And but God was looking out for them. Which, if you read that scripture, you'll read the whole story of the Magi. You'll see what God did to intervene. But here's the thing: they didn't start with all the answers. Okay, they didn't have all the answers when they began their journey. They had a star, and they had a question, uh, and they had a willingness to go, which I think is really important. They were willing to do this. Again, why? Why would they do that? Well, they felt compelled to do it. And I think God honored that, and he led them to Jesus, which is pretty cool. When you hear, I mean, you hear that today, and we won't get off into this because this will be a tangent that we'll never be able to recover from. But you hear stories all the time of people in other religions and other parts of the world where perhaps the gospel has not yet reached, or maybe it's not allowed to be shared openly and publicly. And we hear stories all the time of people having dreams where um, Jesus is sort of being introduced to people in their dreams. So maybe something like that was at work here. So that's what the Magi were doing. Meanwhile, back in Jerusalem, the religious experts, well, they supposedly had all the right answers, right? And so when Herod asked where the Messiah would be born, the chief priests, the scribes, they quoted Micah 2 without any hesitation. They did know the answer for this one. They said Bethlehem. They knew the text. They had the text. They had the right theology, sort of. They had at least the theology background, but they didn't go. All right. And remember what this podcast is called: Practical Christianity. It's practical because it's true. It's practical because it needs to be put into practice. And that's what these religious experts were not willing to do, that the Magi were willing to do. So these religious experts had the theology, they had the scriptures, but they didn't go. They stayed 5 miles away from the fulfillment of their own prophecies. And for some reason, they were content with their knowledge, kind of just content with the status quo, but they were not willing to follow the truth. They were not willing to seek and find the Messiah. So Epiphany challenges us because we don't want to get too high and mighty, like we've got all the answers and we figured it all out. Epiphany challenges us and asks us, are we seeking Christ, or are we content with secondhand religion? That's sort of a play on an idea that I heard from A.W. Tozer one time. A.W. Tozer, in one of his books, said, "Do you know God, like experientially and intimately and personally? Do you know God, or do you only know about God? Do you only know about God secondhand, or have you met God? Do you know him personally?" And that's a little bit about what Epiphany asks us. Have we met the Christ child? Have we are we content with just knowing about him and having some secondhand religious information about him? Or are we pursuing him? Are we seeking him? Are we willing to follow his light wherever it leads, even when that path is unclear? And even when, maybe even especially when, it costs us something. And even when it takes us way outside of our comfort zones. I love hearing stories about what God has been doing in people's lives. Some people who never thought they would do something in particular, just felt really compelled by God to obey where they thought he was leading them, and what they thought he was calling them to do, and the blessings that come from that. And not without cost, and not without discomfort, maybe, or inconvenience, maybe some fear and trepidation, but they wanted to trust God more than they wanted to give in to all of that. And they did, and they were blessed by it. And that's maybe you have something similar in your own life as well. So one of the issues that we need to kind of be aware of in our own lives, especially if you're a Christian and you grew up in the church and you're a member of a church, is we can accumulate a lot of theological knowledge in our Bible studies and small groups. And I love that stuff. I mean, I teach lots of Bible studies. I love reading and studying theology and biblical studies and all that stuff. It's great. I love it. But we can do all of that without ever bending our knees to Jesus Christ as Lord, without ever falling before God in worship on our knees. So we can be experts in doctrine, so to speak, and remain strangers in worship. Experts in doctrine, but strangers in worship. And that is not where I want to be. That's not where I would desire you to be, or anyone for that matter. So we want to make sure that we're not just people who have all the right answers, supposedly, but then we never make the journey. We never commit. We never move. The Magi, interestingly, didn't have a Bible, but they had a star, and they followed it. So my question today, as we kind of wrap up here, is what about you? Are you following that light that you have been given? And if you're a Christian, you do have the scriptures. If you're not a Christian, here in the year 2026, a new year, you have the internet, and there are reliable biblical resources. There are Bibles online. I mean, it's really hard to have an excuse of saying you don't have the scriptures. But are you doing something about it? You have the light. Are you following it? Or are you paralyzed by what you don't know yet? Are you waiting for perfect clarity before you take that first step? A lot of people are. I know I've been there. I want absolutely every answer to every question I have. I want to see all the way down the path and not just the next step. But that's the problem. God doesn't always give us a full map. Sometimes he gives us just enough light to take the next step. And all along, God is saying, don't you trust me? Trust me. I can be trusted. And really, if you've been a Christian for any length of time, you know that God is completely trustworthy. And not only is he trustworthy, but he's good. He loves us. He has our best interest at heart. And he's completely wise. He's all wise. And so not only does he know what is best for us, but he knows the best way to get us where he wants us to go, or to provide for us whatever it is that we need. So he gives us enough light to take the next step, and to do so in a trusting manner. And then God waits to see if we'll trust him enough to take that next step. And so the Magi did, and they came to worship. They didn't come for theological debates. They didn't come to analyze the situation. They didn't stay at a safe distance, which we already talked about. They came, they saw a child, and I don't know, maybe it was the Spirit of God. I really don't know, but they fell and worshiped, at his feet, so to speak, and they gave him treasures. They gave him their treasures, and they went home by another way, because God spoke to them and said, don't go that way, the way you came, because, danger is waiting for you. Instead, go this way. So God not only allowed them to see Christ, to have an opportunity to worship Christ and to provide gifts for Christ, but then he gave them an escape path to get out without harm coming to them. And so these men were changed. They had been changed by this encounter. And I don't know that we know how long they spent there, but it was an amazing encounter. It had to have been, because they were changed. And that's what Epiphany does. Epiphany ought to change the trajectory of our lives. You don't meet Jesus, really meet him, experientially meet Christ, and remain the same. I just don't think you can. I mean, if you do, you still have as the scripture says, you have a heart of stone. Because to meet Christ is to have that heart of stone transformed to a living, beating heart, to be a changed and transformed person with a changed heart, a renewed mind, and a life that exists to pursue Christ and to love Him, to know Him better, to become like Him, and to follow Him more faithfully. And so the question that I want to leave you with for today is, are you seeking Christ? Are you really seeking Him? And have you, if you would say, no, I've already found Him, have you found Him experientially, or are you only getting by on secondhand information? I don't know. Only you and God know your heart. I have to deal with my own heart. And one thing I've been praying for this new year is for God to renew, to quote the Psalm, to renew a right spirit within me. And I want to know Christ better and love Him more and become more like Him and follow Him more faithfully. How about you? So that's just some food for thought as we begin this week and begin this season of Epiphany. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope the Lord will bless you. And I look forward to being with you next time.